In a recent video, which is referenced in the top right, I looked at saving some weight on my Orbea Gain M20 by changing the saddle. And this is the saddle I changed to. It's very light, it was very cheap, and it's very hard. I'm just about to take my super cheap full carbon saddle out for its first ride. I've now been riding this for 27 kilometers. However, before I report on it, I think I ought to fill in a few background details. Sometimes when I go on longer rides, I'll wear 2 pairs of shorts or the undershorts that there's a link to in the top right. However, for this test, I've just decided to wear 1 pair of ordinary cycling shorts. So then, what about the saddle comfort? I've got nothing dramatic to actually report. Although it feels firm, there isn't anything that's particularly uncomfortable. One slightly disconcerting thing is that the saddle is very smooth and slippery, and I find myself sliding around on it quite a lot. So probably the best thing I can say about this saddle is I'm willing to try it on a much longer ride. Today I'm going to try and ride through the 100-kilometer barrier. I have made a couple of concessions. Firstly, I'm wearing my padded undershorts. Secondly, I've dabbed some lubricant, that is Vaseline, in a couple of areas that may be prone to chafing. I've just completed 100 kilometers on this saddle, and for the first 50 kilometers everything was fine. From 50 to 70 kilometers I was getting slight niggles, nothing too drastic, I could easily live with it. However, now I've got to 100 kilometers, things have developed a little. After about 80 kilometers the saddle became a little more uncomfortable. However, it started off as, I suppose, bearably uncomfortable and generally got a bit worse. And by the time I'd got to about 90 kilometers, I would say it was annoyingly uncomfortable, such that every few minutes I would get out of the saddle just to relieve the force on my bottom. However, then I decided to stop and adjust my undershorts, basically moving the silicone pad in them to where my sit bones are, and that really took things back to bearably uncomfortable, and that's how they are at the moment. But overall it's not too bad. I suppose that just confirms what most experienced cyclists know anyway, and that is that it's not all about the saddle. Your shorts and the quality of the padding in them is equally as important. I finished those initial rides using this full carbon fibre saddle, and I've continued to use it over about the last 6 weeks, and I've covered about 1,400 kilometers. So now I think it's time to summarize what I think of this saddle. Because it's light, is it strong enough? And so far I haven't had any problems with creaking, cracking or braking. And this is despite me going through quite a few road irregularities. In fact, one of those irregularities was so large, the force acting through the saddle caused the seat clamp to slip. So in terms of its outright strength, it seems to be good. As far as the long-term durability is concerned, the jury's still out, but I'm fairly confident about it. As I previously mentioned, it's fully carbon fibre, so it has no padding on the top, which means the surface is quite hard and quite unyielding. This has had an effect in terms of the setup. I find I need to get the level of the saddle just right. If I don't, I find myself sliding backwards and forwards on this shiny surface. However, I've now got it set up correctly, which means I tend to feel myself sitting in the center of the saddle and not sliding around too much. I've said that the saddle is hard and shiny, and it has some relatively hard edges on it. However, I haven't found those a problem. On this saddle, they're really quite rounded and smooth. So I've had no chaffing or soreness from the edges of the saddle. And that's true from the hole too. In fact, I don't really notice it being there. Right now, comfort. Now this is going to be very individual to you, but I can describe what it's like for me. I find it reasonably comfortable up to around about 50 kilometers. Above that, the lack of comfort starts to get to me a bit more, and anything above 100 kilometers can start to get, well, let's say very uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that I may have to start moving around on the saddle or standing on the pedals in order to relieve the force from my rear end. Having said that, for these shorter distance rides, I'm quite happy with this saddle. The problem is, many of my rides are between 50 and 100 kilometers, so I enter that zone where it starts to become uncomfortable. For that reason, I'm going to investigate whether I can extend that comfort range by adding a small amount of padding onto the surface of this saddle. So, would I recommend this saddle? Well, if you want something that's cheap and light and comfort isn't your highest priority, I think the answer is yes. If comfort is a concern to you, but you're only riding short distances, I think this saddle would work for you too. However, if you're going on much longer rides, say 100 kilometers or more, I think it's probably best to steer away from this saddle. And myself, when I go on much longer rides, I'm going to swap this saddle out for my Brooks C17. I hope this video has been useful to you. If it has, please give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing. From me, for now, it's goodbye. Now, if you don't like that localized pressure, somebody playing in an aeroplane, spoiling my video